G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. Today I'm joined by
Algared, and I'm joined by.
Execute. And so today's show is a little bit of speculation on what we can take out of the roadmap in regards to the future of the PU and Squadron 42. Funnily enough, we've got this parallel development going. What can we see on the PU roadmap that also affects the Squadron 42 roadmap? And I think the first one that I'd like to give as an example is the Avenger. Algared, do you want to take us on with that?
Yeah, well, probably the big thing with the Avenger was the vertical slice last year. We saw the Avenger show up in there, and that has extrapolated over into the Avenger rebuild we see in the PU. So that's probably the biggest thing I can think of with the Avenger.
Yeah.
What about you?
The Avenger itself, I think, is a really good example of a rework. And I also think, in regards to Squadron 42, it's very clear that it was reworked for that game. I think another example of that would be ships that have been pushed forward in development, and an example of that would be the Hammerhead. We firmly believe here that it's based on turret gameplay. We've said that in the past. And do you kind of, you still agree, I assume, that it's...
Yeah, I one of the other areas I think with the Hammerhead that kind of makes me think that it might be for Squadron 42 is just the lore, the depths of the lore with it. Like the fact that we're told with not just one ship that excelled in the past, but several ships and several models of ships, and how it developed over time. So this is a really old ship design, and that just makes me think we'll see it in some form.
Yeah.
In Squadron.
Where that's a ship that's been pushed forward. Another example would be a ship of, like, say, the Banded Merchantman that's been pushed way back, because it appears to me, at least, a lot of these ships are being pushed forward. We know Squadron 42 is a real big focus of the company, and ships that are not in it seem to be taking a backseat to ships that they are bringing forward into the game.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that just because a ship is being worked on now, it's definitely going to be in Squadron. No. Nor does it mean that a ship that's not being worked on may not, or doesn't appear to be worked on, it won't be in Squadron. We're just saying what we see seems to imply that certain ships may more likely be in Squadron than ships that aren't.
It's logical reasoning to think that they're being made for a reason at this time.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Another example of that is the AI. Now, you could theoretically, in making a single-player game, you could do everything very scripted, but the way they're making all the tools in this game at the moment is they're very overarching, and they like to share a lot of the technology. Now, if you're designing AI to be dropped into almost any scenario and be able to figure out where to go through mapping of the area, why would you do scripted when you can use that to kind of automatically do it all? It doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel, so to speak.
To do that. And to go back to the vertical slice, we actually saw an example of how the AI is working in the Squadron 42 vertical slice. We saw the characters leaving, or AI leaving the galley and walking around each other or twisting the body to get around someone. Now, that's just the AI behavior that's been put in. And that's the type of behavior that we'll see that applies to both games. And while you might have those heavily scripted characters, you might have the characters you need to talk to, that character is still going to follow its timeline. It's still going to go to sleep. It's still going to get up and do its job. It's still going to have its whatever. But then when you talk to it, it'll go into that highly scripted. Then when it's doing it, that's what it wants. So I think there's that real strong, what's being done in the AI now does apply blatantly to Squadron 42. We'll see that in the way the characters walk, the smoothing of the walk. We'll see that in the way they vault over objects. We'll see that in the way they do stealth.
Sorry, I'm just smiling because you weren't really robotic and your camera was moving really slow. It was quite funny. And I'm going to leave that in because it was hilarious. But another example of that technology that they're doing that I think would definitely make sense as well is object container streaming. Now, again, you could model the game and you could use your hard drive to load in the different things required. But if you look at the size of the files, Chris Roberts recently said it's 32 gigabyte to have just Hurston and Crusader, and it would be willing, it's logical to take that and put that into the single player game. It would be the same size files, but putting object container streaming into the single player is a lot easier to integrate than it is to integrate into a multiplayer game because you've got all the network code involved and you've got to have all those things hooked up. I would be willing to bet money that object container streaming is already in Squadron 42 because it was easy to integrate into a single player experience than into a multiplayer, and therefore the game is a little bit further ahead than the PU version. And that... No, go ahead.
Go on.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I can see that being the case because while I might have the stuff in the Squadron 42, having that ability to quickly load the areas or load an area and not load that next room is going to make the game run smoother and more quickly and not have to read files off a computer. Yep. I can remember playing Wing Commander.
Yep.
And you'd get to a certain point and you got to change the discs because there wasn't enough stuff for the computer to deal with it. It had to reload and take the stuff. And this will actually take that away.
And you don't want to kid yourself either. Like, warping between two planets is literally a load screen. That's fundamentally what it is. Let's not cheat ourselves.
Although the difference is, we at the moment we can hop up and walk around our ship while we're doing it, or while that's in the process of being done. So
yeah.
So there is an element where it is and it isn't.
Yeah, and if you look at MMOs traditionally, they do it on more of a distance approach from your character. So you could walk into somewhere like Lord of the Rings or World of Warcraft, into a main town, and more people the closer to you, the more lag you would be. But with a container streaming, obviously, you can just say, oh, well, they're on the other side of that building. I don't need to see them. So I think it's a technology that will be picked up and used by a lot more games like MMOs going forward as well.
It's one of those aspects which I think will have that impact in today's gaming world that the old Sound Blaster had back in Wing Commander days, where Wing Commander uses Sound Blaster, makes the sound awesome, and I can remember in the 80s, whenever you bought a computer, you bought it with Sound Blaster. You bought the Sound Blaster card because you wanted the game to sound awesome.
Exactly.
And I can see games using that type of tech just because it does make it run so much more smoothly.
Yeah.
So
I think this next one I'll let you talk about.
Yep. So one of the other things we were looking at as we looked at the roadmap was what things does the roadmap tell us that aren't mentioned? And so one of these was looking at the way in which they reposition the professions. So we've got mining, and we were going to get refueling and salvage and other things coming in the next couple. And yet, in the current state of a roadmap, which is still not set in stone, they've been kind of shunted off into the far future. And it was when Chris was talking
two patches, so 6 months, but yeah, far future.
Far future.
For old people, it's really far away. I get it. That's fine.
For guys like me, it is a long way. Don't you remember that, Sonny?
You need to remember, sometimes you go into robot mode.
That really made me think that.
Go ahead. It's just funny. Go ahead.
One of the things that really made me think that was hearing Chris on the weekend in RTV, and he basically said it seemed he was saying like the professions, they just weren't ready. And so we had to move them, and it almost was as if he's saying the stuff that supports it isn't there. And so rather than redo these professions, do the profession and then have to rework it again, let's get the background stuff in first that's going to support that profession before we bring it in. And that's why it's been moved, not just one. It's not just been shunted out because it wasn't ready. It's not ready for a reason, and it's been pushed even further away. And I think that's the big thing, the big takeaway on that. It's not stated, but I think the PU roadmap clearly says that.
Hopefully that means they don't have to rework things like mining too much either going forward, because if they have to do that code base, I hope they'd plan that ahead so it reconnects more smoothly as well.
Well, I think what's happened is they did the mining, and they've put mining in, and they've realised to go really advance on mining they need X, Y, and Z that's not there. And so I think mining will be kind of the test bed they use, and they keep expanding on that as they're putting those in. But we won't see the other things come in until that background stuff, until the backcode stuff that supports it is actually in and running. And I really think that's why they've been moved.
All right, the last thing I want to end on today is the F8 Lightning. Now, I want you guys, I'm kind of going to leave you guys with a question here that I want you to think about yourself, and that is, why is that ship being made now? Now, obviously, it's in Squadron 42, but we won't be able to use it, or will we? You know, is it a sign that Squadron 42 is not as far away as we thought it was? Is it, you know, is it, like, think about it, Algared. What's your thought? Like, why are they making this ship so early?
Yeah, I would have thought, you know, it's an anvil ship. And if you look at the monthly report, the LA office says the art team have just finished grey boxing the F8 Lightning, and in August they'll be moving on to the Hawk. Now, I would have thought, if I don't need the F8 Lightning, I'd have flipped it and been working on the Hawk first. But clearly, the priority of the F8 Lightning seems to say it's needed and we want it now because of that. And it seems to imply we might be that Squadron 42 may be more advanced than, as you said, than we've been led to believe.
Yep. And that's where I'm going to leave it today, with that big question mark. Obvious answer that some people might respond is, oh, they need it so they can build the levels, but literally you can do that with a placeholder. You don't need the same ship, because you can just put different guns on and change it with numbers. You don't actually need the model. So
and the other thing in terms of levels you just made me think of in the monthly review was the Derby office was working on fixing up the 16 scenes for Squadron, and that was a priority, and they actually got those done in 2 weeks, not the 3 allocated. So that could be another indication. And we've also got CitizenCon and
Holiday Livestream. Big things coming. Big things in the works, we think. So
hopefully, big things in the works.
Yeah.
Don't expect anything major in terms of PU until maybe 2020. But you know, hey, hopefully we'll see something.
So
something in our stocking for being good little boys and girls.
So yeah, if you want to leave us a comment on the Discord or leave us a comment here in the video, we read everyone. We try to reply to as many as we can. Have I missed anything, Algared?
Not that I can think of.
So this has been...
I've been Al, and that's been...
I Execute, and we'll catch you guys next time.
And we're out of here. Take care.